I am here with Matthias. Matthias, thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, just to begin, can you explain to us what Biosphere Expeditions is and why you founded it 20 years ago?
So Biosphere Expeditions is a citizen science organization, a non-profit that works in wildlife conservation. And the way we work is through citizen scientists, so that's ordinary people who come and help us to bridge the gap in conservation, where people who work in conservation, they're usually missing two things: money and people. So we provide both. And I founded it 20 years ago. Well, because I always wanted to do kind of expedition work in the field, and I thought I was going to become an academic, and that was quite restrictive. And I organized expeditions as a student, and then someone said to me, well, why don't you just, organize expeditions for a living? And I thought that was a brilliant idea. And then at that time, 20 years ago, the citizen science thing was just up and coming. And we came in at the right time. Nowadays, you've got to be a lot more careful with lots of charlatans around the place. Yeah, but that's the start of it.
So it was mainly to plug a gap where there weren't enough volunteers or wasn't enough manpower to the conservation work. Do you think now it's evolved as in the same way that the climate crisis has intensified and become more explicitly about reversing the habitat loss and the destruction that's going on? Has that been how it's evolved?
Not really. I mean, the climate crisis has always been there. It's only we're taking notice now. The closer it gets to, or the more we can see the effects, and the fewer deniers there are, although there's still too many of them, the more urgent it seems now. But I mean, it was Hansen, I think it's now 30 years ago, who first pointed it out, and nobody kind of listened at the time. So that's one part of the question about the climate crisis. The other part is that the situation in conservation has really always been the same, that there's not enough funding and that there's not enough people doing the job. And actually it's intensified. That really has intensified as governments have been cutting funding from conservation. So we've always plugged the gap. Citizen science is more people are aware of citizen science now, certainly, than 20 years ago. But the goals have always been the same.
So you're on the front lines of conservation, and you have been since 1999, if not sooner, if you count your student expeditions that you organised. What have you seen in that time that's made you more aware of the problems that we're facing from an ecological perspective? What have you noticed a greater impact on the environment? Have you noticed the impact of humanity on the biosphere increasing?
I mean, we've certainly noticed the effects of climate change. Everyone all around the world, we have projects all around the world, and all the locals and the local scientists that we work with, for one, they say, oh, the weather is not the same as it used to be everywhere. It's unpredictable, it's changed. So I obviously know that weather and climate are two different things, but things are changing. If you're looking at species distributions, then of course we notice a change. Species that were in one area but not in another can now move into that area because it's getting warmer. These kinds of effects. But the underlying problem of a system not fit for purpose has always been there. And the world being the system, the neoliberal system that we have these days, and that's based on maximizing profits and greed, and all the negative effects that come with it. Whether it's pharmaceutical companies stopping research in antibiotics recently because it's just not enough money, or people just putting profits always before everything else, and nature included. That's always been there.
Right.
And that's a story I've seen for the last 20 years, 25 years.
Do you think it's a misalignment of our values with the values we need to coexist in the biosphere? What is it about the values of our current global society that are putting us so at odds with the environment that we're living in?
Well, I think it's the neoliberal system first and foremost. The system that puts an emphasis on profit over everything else. A system that by law requires companies to put profit above everything else. So of course, they have to do that, and that's trickled down in the last 40 years since Hayek, who's an economist who first proposed it, into our mindsets. It's about profits. It's about maximizing my income. It's about maximizing, my enjoyment. It's about me, and not the community, not the world at large. And so it's that. My phrase. It's a system not fit for purpose anymore.
Right.
And there is, whether it's the NHS, whether it's Boeing not being able to build planes anymore because what used to be an engineers club is now something that's captured by the financiers, or financial crises one after the other accelerating, or wholesale destruction of the rainforest for timber profits. I mean, it's all connected.
So I agree with what you're saying about neoliberalism, but I can't help but notice that this treatment of the environment as a resource to be plundered goes back a lot longer than neoliberalism. So we're looking at the way we were treating the world back from like the 1600s. King Henry VIII ran out of oak for his fleet back in the 16th century and had to import it from Norway. So this treatment of the environment has been going on for a long time, and it seems to me that one of the reasons we're in this very dire situation is because values take centuries to change. Our technology changes very quickly, but our relationship to one another and how we see communities and individuals, these take a very long time to change. So we're stuck in a situation where we're addicted, or we can't see beyond these ways of treating the world and thinking, but we have to if we're going to survive. So what is it about those values? What can we change, and what values do we need to bring to the fore to survive?
Well, I think there's two things to it. There's our primate nature as human beings, and that's been there, since human or Homo sapiens came about. So well before Henry VIII. But that problem is compounded. It's compounded, but it's actually enhanced by the neoliberal system, which kind of rewards the inane desire for looking out after ourselves, which we have. Our survival instinct, of course. In the savannas of Africa, where humans came about, that's what you needed to survive. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to be like this. Human history is littered with examples of people being selfless and not just looking out after themselves and not just being greedy. But if you combine that with a system, and that's where neoliberalism comes in, I think, that rewards that kind of behavior, rewards it in the kind of money you make, the kind of kudos you get from society, then you're in real trouble. And if you have a system that requires by law companies to put profits above anything else, then you're really, running into trouble. And then this is the third point you mentioned. You then put technology with it. It's getting worse. It was hard work for the Henry VIII to run out of oak, but he managed. But with technology today, you can fell oak trees 500 times quicker than Henry VIII could. So it's much easier for us to have those devastating effects through the technology that we have.
Yeah. It strikes me that one of the things about neoliberalism is that it places a great emphasis, or a sole emphasis, on markets as the only force that can solve the problem. And yet, so far, in the last 40 years, the market response to climate change has been pitiful. There hasn't been a market response. So when an existential threat has faced humanity, the solution of the markets has been business as usual. So if you ever needed an example of why markets can't solve everything, why yes, they are the most efficient way to distribute resources, but they can't be expected to solve these big existential issues, isn't it staring us in the face where they have no solution so far to the climate crisis.
Well, exactly, and it's because the markets don't think far ahead. It's always about maximizing profits now, not thinking about what's the world going to be like for my children or my children's children. So that is a big problem, as well as you talked about the emphasis on the markets. There's no emphasis on the commons. The commons are basically forgotten or not valued anymore.
Yes.
Neither is the household. It's this total emphasis on markets.
Yes.
That is clearly, and I come back to this phrase again and again, not fit for purpose anymore. Really is not fit for purpose. And there's alternatives, donut economics, whatever. There are alternative models. It's just that we're so entrenched in this. And it's hard to and it's easy to forget that actually this has only been around since for the last 50 years, but it feels so entrenched. But the thing is, it always feels entrenched until it changes. East Germany, I'm from Germany, I grew up in West Germany, but the East German system felt entrenched until it suddenly flipped. The Soviet Union felt like it was there forever until it flipped suddenly. That is my hope, and that's why we're taking Biosphere in that direction, that we want to become more activist. There are studies that are saying you need 25% of the population or 5%. They disagree, but once you've reached a certain critical mass, then the system can flip. And I really, really think this is what we need.
Okay, so I'd like to focus on that a little bit more now. I mean, you've been running Biosphere for 20 years. It's been mainly focused on conservation and citizen science, and this year, on its 20th anniversary, you've decided to pivot somewhat and focus a bit more on activism and campaigning. So what drove that decision?
Oh, everything that we just talked about, that it's no longer good enough to sit on our hands. We need to, we're running out of time. It's that urgency that the people who think about it are feeling. So, my skills are, I'm a biologist, I'm a conservationist, but, we talk to a lot of people who will have that kind of mindset. And the more of those that we can persuade to, we call it a do more campaign, so they come on an expedition, you're kind of preaching to the converted, but that's good. But if you then can convert the converted to doing even more, go on the streets, lobby your MP, make your voice heard, then the desire is to help to reach that tipping point, when enough of society says we need societal change.
So is the goal to not radicalize, but inspire and incentivize the citizen scientists that you get to come on expeditions with you to then essentially spread the gospel and inspire active change in their communities? Is that the way you're going to do this?
Yeah, I don't like the word gospel because that's a matter of faith. We're talking about science. But yes, it is about spreading the word. It is about making as many people as aware as possible that we need to do something. This is urgent. We can't sit on our hands if we want to be able to look our children in the eye. I mean, when I was a child, I read a book called "What Did You Do During the War, Daddy?" And that was about children asking their fathers, what did you do? This is in Germany, of course. What did you do during the war? What did you support it? Were you running alongside it, or did you oppose it? And I feel I'm in that situation. I mean, of course, it's different, but it's in that situation. My children will ask me, "What did you do about this, Dad?" And my answer is, well, I'm not a powerful person, but we talk to a lot of people. We have a lot of people coming on our expeditions. We encourage them to take this seriously because it has to be taken seriously and to take action.
Right.
So we've done these 20 tips for 20 years, and they go from light green of what everyone should do. This is your recycling, say no to bottled water, switch off the lights and stuff. But that ain't gonna save the planet. To the dark green of join Extinction Rebellion, go on the street, demand change, become an activist yourself.
ultimately you want people to have a disproportionately strong impact on the world around them, and to do that in a positive way. But of course, a lot of people will get discouraged because they think, well, 75% of all emissions come from 12 countries. We can do whatever we want, but as long as China keeps industrializing, as long as there are, over 1 billion Indians wanting middle-class American lifestyles and gunning for it, it's futile. How can you get people to have a realistic view of the challenge, but at the same time not to get disheartened?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I mean about the flipping point. At the moment, it feels disheartening, but we need to be able to reach that critical mass. And then when the flipping point comes, then hopefully everything flips with it. Because for better or for worse, and at the moment for worse, the world is looking towards Western society for, they watch the Hollywood movies and stuff. And then of course you can't expect some person in India who's watching that not to want a house in Beverly Hills either, but that's where the flipping point comes in.
Right. So it strikes me that what we need to do, we can't expect everyone to be a climate hero, but we can create systems, social systems, that make it easy for an ordinary, average Joe person to behave in an environmentally friendly way. So we need to create new habits, new forms of behavior, new norms that make it easy. If it's too hard, people just won't do it. We need to make it easy to be climate friendly. That must involve governments. It simply has to.
Of course, but society can change its behaviors. Think about, there's millions of examples. When I was a child, nobody belted up in the car. Wore seatbelts. Now it's completely you feel naked if you're driving around not without a seatbelt. Me Too, I only have to mention the name of how that's changed people's behaviors and the way people think. So I know it's only small examples, but this is a big problem, and we're trying to get. As I've said, I'm not a powerful man. I can only influence the people that I can influence, and I can do within the realms of my power what we can do. And for me, that is, or for the organization, that's our 20 tips and becoming more activist and encouraging people to take more action.
I suppose that you say you're not a powerful man, but you've created this organisation which has had a vital role in protecting endangered species, creating new national parks in countries where that's not very easily done, and recruiting thousands of ordinary people to actually get on the front lines of conservation work and do their bit. So do you think that experience has shown you that you can have a big impact even if you are a regular person with a concern for the environment? Has that influenced you?
Yes, of course. It is humbling, and sometimes it's even tear-jerking to read what people say when they've come back from an expedition, and they write to us. And in the office we sometimes joke, we could put this on the website, but actually we can't because nobody will believe it.
Right.
We just thought we'd make it up. How it's changed people's lives, and how it's it's one of the best things they've ever done, and they will never look at a coral reef the same way again, or at nature the same way again, and stuff. It has that effect.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I appreciate the power, in inverted commas, that I have.
Yeah.
I wanted to turn it into something even more powerful.
Yes.
Addressing addressing the most pressing emergency, and it is an emergency that humanity is facing.
So there's another issue here whereby there's an irony in that the whole world is chasing Western lifestyles, but it's been scientifically proven, that we're less happy than before we had these material comforts. And I think the key here is nature, because we're losing touch with nature through our increasingly digitized and industrialized societies. Now, nature has also been shown scientifically to help with things like depression. Doctors are now prescribing going for a walk in the woods as a cure to depression. So it seems like that's a really interesting missing bit of the puzzle. Not only can we get back in touch with nature and do some conservation work, but we can also improve our mental well-being more effectively than if we just chase this consumerist goal of more and more and more.
And then, we're back at neoliberalism. You need to keep the neoliberalist system alive. You need endless consumption. You need to pretend, and this is another issue, that there's an endless growth on a finite planet. It's a mathematical impossibility, but the system requires it. That's why we need system change. And bring nature into it. I believe that's kind of the antidote to all of this. It can be to connect people to nature, to connect people to what they really want. Do they need the latest iPhone? No, they don't. Do they need the latest laptop or whatever? These marketing machineries make you believe that you really need. No, you need to. These are all extrinsic values.
Yes.
We need to concentrate on intrinsic values much more.
Yes. There's a nice term that the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, that's a Hungarian name, came up with, which is the term autotelic. And autotelic refers to activities that you do for their own sake, because you enjoy doing them. So when you take a photo of yourself to post to Instagram, it could be autotelic, but at the same time, it's very unlikely to be, because you're doing it for extrinsic reasons, for how other people see you, for example, for social status or for whatever.
For likes or something.
Exactly. Whereas something autotelic is, I do this thing, it might be playing guitar, it might be walking in the woods, it might be writing a poem, whatever it might be, not because I will gain something extrinsic from it, but because I'm doing it for the thing itself.
Yeah.
And he links it to a state of mind called flow, which is where you're so into something, the world kind of fades away, you lose track of time, and you're really into what you're doing. And when you emerge from that state, you have a sense of well-being, a sense of personal growth, and a sense of accomplishment. And that psychologically is very, very good for you. So it strikes me as though there's, as you say, we need to just almost get back to our real nature and our true sense of being.
Absolutely. And remember what's important. And I mean, I've just come to do this interview from the climate march at Westminster, and there was a buzz about this place. It helps that it was a beautiful blue sky day, but I was thinking as I was marching, that about this extrinsic, intrinsic, that it's just good to be with people who who are there for the same reason, and they're only there for that reason. It's not. I mean, of course, there will be people posting selfies and stuff, but it's. I got the same buzz actually that I get from walking in the woods. It was kind of on the same level, because you're walking in an environment where you feel you should be, where you feel at home, where you feel that your heart lies, if that's not too melodramatic, but
Sure. The scary thing about this is, I'm sure that in your time you've met some powerful people, and what you realise is that the people who are controlling this, or at least in part control of this big machine that's tearing up the environment for profit, for short-term profit, they're not monsters by and large. They're not. They're just essentially doing they're playing by the rules of the game, but they're not.
System.
Yeah, they're not monsters. They're regular people. I used to work at The Guardian, and in 2014 we had an editorial meeting where we were joined by the CEO of BP, and he came from. In fact, I have to be careful. It was either BP or Shell. One of BP or Shell, and he was a Dutchman, and he was basically being grilled by the heads of the editors of The Guardian, who was basically saying, what on earth do you think you're doing? And he defended himself and said, look, I've got children, I've got daughters, I understand, I'm really worried about the climate crisis too. And it was fascinating to see him say it, because you think, but you're lobbying to drill in the Arctic. How can... And he said, well, look, I sit down at the breakfast table, I have to face my daughters every morning, I'm just as worried as what you guys are. So it strikes me that the really frightening thing is that there isn't anyone in control. There aren't this maniacal...
Sorry.
It's all right. There aren't these maniacal, evil people controlling that we need to beat. It's that we need to change the rules of the game so we don't incentivize destructive behavior. I mean, have you noticed that when you've spoken to people who are in charge of big companies or who are politicians who aren't acting, the kind of people that Extinction Rebellion is trying to influence. Have you come across them?
Yes, and I've had. It made me smile when you told me what that CEO said, because quite often I think that's a bit rehearsed. Of course, they have children, but it makes the rest of us think. Oh, well, they're just regular people. They're actually nice guys. And I wonder how much is genuine, and I wonder how much was developed by some marketing company. For them to say this.
PR departments.
PR departments, exactly.
No.
So I take that with a pinch of salt, because what they're doing on a day, or what their companies are doing, or the companies that they're in charge in, that's evil. If you talk about lobbying, drilling in the Arctic, or the tobacco industry, now marketing to children in Asia, or I mean, lots of evil stuff. But it's it's chasing profits.
Yeah. It strikes me that one of the issues is that in the last 20 years or so, millions of people have been lifted out of poverty, partially through liberalised capitalism. It has very effectively taken lots of people out of poverty in China, in India, around the developing world, and it's at the moment our best system of wealth creation. Of course, the one big problem is that the price for that development is, well, in 30, 40 years' time, there won't be an ecosystem from which to draw the resources that's powering the whole thing.
Yeah.
So we're stuck in a little bit of a bind where, our best engine for wealth creation is undermining the entire ecology from which our wealth is derived. So how can we change the rules of the game while maintaining its wealth-creating power?
Well, I've mentioned there's alternatives. One of them, or I think the most promising one, is donut economics. That you work a system that has an ecological ceiling, that has a societal foundation, and then you have a comfort space within which all activities need to take place. I think it's that it's really something that we as a society should look at, but not many people know about it.
Yeah, and it's not really a policy issue. I mean, the trouble is that a lot of politicians will base their policies on what can be sold to a population, what will get them votes. Yeah. And I mean, it's beginning to change now, but in the last 30 years, the climate and the environment has barely been a vote winner. And I saw a recent poll in America that for the very first time in, I think, March or April this year, there was a poll that showed that more Americans thought that the environment was the most important issue than the economy for the first ever time.
I saw today in the news in Germany that the poll for the first time ranked the climate emergency as the most important issue for the election, over and above immigration and the economy.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's the same effect,
Yeah.
And that's, we're getting there. We're getting towards that tipping point, hopefully. We haven't talked about, overpopulation, which is a huge issue, which is really hard to tackle. But, let's start with changing the system.
Yeah, absolutely. With overpopulation, obviously it's a big problem. I'd be interested to know your views. It seems to me that all the forecasts say that the global population will rise until about 10 billion,
exactly.
Level off,
11
and then drop quite significantly. And that's that's based on current rates of development and what that does to the birth rate. But it also seems that most of the growth is in what's usually known as the developing world. I don't like that term, but so what if we can get the developing world to skip our industrial stage of capitalism, for example, having national grids of electricity based on coal-burning power plants, and go straight to, say, having solar panels on their roofs individually? Is that possible?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's possible, but I think in an ideal world that's what we do. We've made the mistakes. Let's not repeat them. Let's create an alternative system. Let's have enough education that people understand how that system would work, and that you can, you don't need a huge house. If you think in the 1950s, the average house size, and people, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I agree
about.
You don't need a SUV, I guess It's madness.
I agree with you what you're saying about consumption, but I think if we focus on chastising people for their consumption, we will turn too many people off. We need to find a way of making people feel like they're going to continue getting richer and better off, but in a way that doesn't kill and harm the environment. Yeah. And it strikes me that it's just a coordination problem. It's a classic human problem in that we have all the solutions, we just need to coordinate all the big powers in such a way that they all begin to change together so that we can affect change throughout different countries. We have the technology to maintain this level of existence if we switch the materials we use, if we switch to renewable energy, if we go through a transition phase, we could go towards a circular economy like the donut economics that you were talking about and basically maintain a very good standard of living. It's just that how do you get that transition to happen when lots of well-off people will lose out in the medium term?
I think you need that flip. You need, for want of a better term, you need that revolution. You need that, like we've seen, the fall of the Soviet Union. The end of East Germany and other societal changes. You need that.
So I think the difference is that regime change is one thing, but changing values is another.
Yeah.
And I think that at the heart of the problem we've got is basically creating a world where you can't just do environmentally harmful things and get away with it.
Exactly.
So we need people to just go,
absolutely, yeah.
Well, where did this come from? I just ordered this from Amazon, this whatever it might be, but where did the plastic come from?
Yeah.
Who made it? We need to start asking those questions. Yeah. And so when companies offer certain things, such as straws that are made of plastic, so you go on an aeroplane, you're given headphones for the flight that have got plastic, metal and copper in them. And at the end of the flight, when you depart the aeroplane, you can see those headphones strewn all over the seats and the floor. I think this is madness. You mean to say that for every flight, every single passenger is given headphones which they then discard? And this happens every flight all around the world continuously? What are we expecting to happen? We need to get to the point where the passengers go, what do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
And suddenly it becomes an embarrassment to offer those sorts of things. But how do we make that transition when in the meantime, someone will have to lose somewhere? Either the airline or the people who have to go without headphones. We need to make that cultural transition, and we can see it happen. I don't know if you saw in the UK, but in the last year, the straw thing, single-use plastics, has become a big deal.
Yeah.
I think the EU...
And now it'll, to ask for a straw, you feel bad. So I mean, that's an example of norms, societal norms changing, and obviously it's flexible and it can be changed. And I don't like what you said, regime change. It's system change. I think we need, and then the rest will flow from it. I think, if we put the environment at the heart of everything, not profits, then those questions that people ask themselves, they will flow from them. And then to pick up on another point that you said earlier, is I also believe that a blame culture is not the way to go.
Yeah.
None of us are perfect. I have lots of air miles because I visit these projects all around the world. So, we have to do what we can do, within our power.
Yeah.
Whether it's Biosphere talking to the people with the 20 tips and activism, or I've got rid of my car. Biosphere doesn't run big offices. We're all decentralized, working from home, and it's all those changes, these adjustments, going to car clubs and car sharing and whatever is possible without the blame game. I'm vegan, but I don't go to someone else and say, well, you must stop eating meat.
Yeah.
I mean, I encourage that, and the expeditions are vegetarian. And it's made quite a lot of people think about it and realize, well, actually I can survive on a vegetarian diet for a week or two, but it's not that blame game and trying to preach people. That doesn't work in conservation either.
No. It must be about, rather than hectoring people, it's about opening their eyes so that they see for themselves that change is necessary, not lecturing them and blaming them and creating more division and more conflict, which will only cause people to turn against this movement and go, well, you're a bunch of, naysayers, Luddites who just want to turn us back into the Stone Age because, that fits your value system, and it will just create more division. But I do want to ask you, in the time we've got remaining, a quite broad question, which is, knowing what you know and having seen what you've seen, are you optimistic about us as a species reversing these trends and surviving in some form for the next millennium?
Well, I can't give you an answer to that because I have good days and I have bad days.
Right.
Sometimes I think, oh God, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
And other days, today I feel buoyed because I've been to that, climate strike demo, and so it feels like the world is full of people who see the world the same way. But then I go on a conservation project, and you see some destruction happening, that is based on corporate greed or greed of individual people. You think, this is hopeless.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I'm one of many people who feel this way. But overall, I think we still have time to turn it around, and I really feel there's some momentum behind this now.
It feels like we're reaching the point where we can no longer ignore it, as it was for so many years in the 90s and noughties, where it was kind of a side issue that if you were interested in it, it got talked about if you're in the right circles, but it wasn't touching the mainstream. And now it's like you can't ignore it. And I'm noticing people in my generation, so people might call me a millennial, they're getting worried about it. They're thinking, should I put money into my pension? Is it worth buying this house when in 10 years the fabric of society might start to render and come apart? And I never heard things like that 4 or 5 years ago.
Agreed.
And people are starting to get really frightened.
And sometimes it is that generational change. Often it's that generational change that you need. I mean, that's in conservation. It's the same thing. You go, I don't know. You talk to a fisherman, and try and educate them that systems whereby you protect some areas and don't fish them out, then you have more fish to fish. But I'm over 50. People in my generation are set in their ways. It's hard to flip them, as it were. And it's the same. The fisherman, in his 50s is unlikely to flip, but his son is much more likely to flip.
Absolutely.
So, that generational change. And you saying that, and other people saying it. And my children saying it. That this is really. I mean, my daughter has taken the day of school for climate to go on the climate strike. So
you've got 3 children, is that right?
Yeah. And
how do you approach this subject with them? How do you talk to them about what's going on?
Well, because they've been on expeditions with us, throughout their lives, and I mean, it's not something that is difficult to talk about, or we talk about it a lot. But I say, well, I'm going to be dead. It's your generation that's going to really feel the effects. We need to do something about it, and they know what we're doing and what Biosphere is doing, and that we're doing the best that we can within the limits of our power.
So it strikes me that has resonance when it comes to the point about having children. Yes. Yeah. Having fewer children is the biggest impact you can have on the environment. But if you are going to have children, try and bring them up like Greta Thunberg, right? Because you might think that, stop having children. That's not going to happen. Human beings will continue to have children, whether you tell them to or not, right? You can't stop them from that. But what you can do is try and make your child part of the solution, right? If your child can influence 10 other people to have a better effect on the environment, then surely that's a net gain in some capacity. So it's not as simple as stop having children, right? It's about the right values.
I agree. And I mean, apart from the fact that maybe 20 years ago, if I'd known what I know now, then I wouldn't have had children. But that's a theoretical discussion.
Right.
And I love my children, of course. And so the next best thing is to bring them up good world citizens.
Right. So if there are people out there who want to have an impact on the environment, but they're city dwellers, they're kind of disconnected. What can they do to have a disproportionate influence on turning the situation around and having a positive effect on their environment?
Oh, I mean, go to our 20 tips. You know, it goes from light green, that everybody really should do, to the dark green of joining the revolution that we're experiencing at the moment, hopefully. The world is not going to be saved by doing our recycling and using energy efficient light bulbs. Yes, we should do that, but that should just be a given. We need to do more. So go on our website and look at the 20 tips, decide what's for you, and then jump on the bandwagon with as many as you possibly can.
Sure. Okay, and if people do want to find out more, if they want to know more about you, or if they want to follow you on social media, do you have any way for them to get in touch with you?
Just go to the Biosphere Expeditions website, and then the 20 tips is just /20 tips, and the rest is all on the website.
Well, Matthias, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I just want to say that it's a real relief to know that there are people like you out there fighting, using their talents and their commitment and determination for the good of the environment, and I hope you inspire many others like you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, very kind.